Welcome to Week, the political roundtable from the Commonwealth Club of California from Monday, July 10th, 2017. Last week, of course, the nation celebrated the 4th of July. There was fireworks, picnics, bands, burnt grilled food. And National Public Radio tweeted out the Declaration of Independence line by line throughout the day. Now, some on the far right apparently got a little misinterpreting in their aspect. They thought it was a call for treason. Now, yes, who knew that our nation's founding document would require a trigger warning for the alt-right? I suppose trigger warning means something different to them, but so let's just move on. I'm John Zipper. I'm your host for Week, and I'm the Commonwealth Club's Vice President of Media and Editorial. Very glad to be here with you, everyone in the audience, and this great panel. On today's program, we're going to discuss the latest in the ever-evolving Russia-Trump saga, as well as the president's performance at the G20 summit, Jerry Brown's role as a global green warrior, the fate of the GOP healthcare bill, more states that are taking on the federal government on various issues, and of course other political news, and we'll wrap everything up with our live news quiz. As always, I like to note that the Commonwealth Club has people of a wide range of views, so any opinions that are expressed up here are those solely of the speakers and not of the Commonwealth Club. Now let's meet our panelists for today. I'm going to start on the far end with Carla Marinucci. She's a senior writer for Politico California Playbook, of course, at Politico.com. She's on Twitter at @CMarinucci. Next to her is Bob Butler, a reporter for KCBS Radio, and he's on Twitter at BobButler7. So welcome. And next to me is Dr. James Taylor, Director of African American Studies and a Professor of Political Science at the University of San Francisco. He's also a lecturer at the University of California, Berkeley. So give him a hand. Welcome all. I think you all know how this is done. There are question cards throughout the room. Fill them out, and we'll collect them, bring them up here, and I will try to ask as many as we can during the hour. So on to our roundtable. And once again, we begin our program with the Trump-Russia story. I think we'll continue doing this until we, end up...
Get a resolution.
Yes, until the impeachment series takes over. Now, actually, there's been a number of things happen recently. Last week, of course, President Trump was in Hamburg, Germany for the G20 summit. He met Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, for the first time during his presidency. And this weekend, the New York Times reported that of a meeting between the president's son, son-in-law, and a former campaign manager at Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer who's close to the Kremlin. It's a lot of stuff in that one sentence. So, Carla, let's start with this whole Trump family Russia thing. What's the latest? What do we know?
John, I don't know. If somebody called you up and said, I want to meet with the top people at the Commonwealth Club, but I don't know what the name is, and I'm not exactly sure what they want to talk about, but arrange a meeting for me, in the executive offices.
Sure.
Would that fly? And that is the issue with Donald Trump Jr. I talked to a veteran campaign consultant, Gary South, today on this issue, and I said, Gary, is this ever done in campaigns? And we know that people try to drop negative information on other campaigns. And he said, first of all, he said it happened to him in the recall campaign. In 2003, somebody called him up and said, I'm a ex-reporter from the National Enquirer. I got dirt on Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's so good that they won't even print it in the Enquirer. I want to meet with you. And Gary said right away, I said, oh no, I smelled a rat right away. There's no way I'm going to meet with somebody I don't know who's going to use this against me eventually. It's going to get out. It's going to hurt my candidate. He absolutely could not believe that Donald Trump Jr., and he mentioned the fact that, by the way, in the Bush-Gore campaign, if you may remember, the Gore people got a package in brown paper, a briefing book that belonged to the Bush people. What did they do with it? They called the FBI. Exactly. I mean, the idea that a foreign operative would call you up and want to meet in Trump Tower just down the hall from your guy. And you'd get together all the top people, Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner, but you didn't know who the person was. I mean, it's just everything about it. Yeah. A lot of these top operators are telling me just doesn't pass the smell test, A, and B. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders today was asked in the press briefing, aren't you a little concerned? This is the third time Jared Kushner has failed to indicate his meeting with a Russian official. And her answer was, well, he just didn't fill out the forms all the way.
He's a very busy man.
I guess that's the answer.
Well, what gets me about this whole meeting is that, okay, you have some sketchy attorney calls you up and says they want to meet with you, and you don't know who they are, but they say they have information detrimental to Hillary Clinton. So, oh, yes, I'm going to have that meeting. But there's no collusion. I mean, what we talked about this earlier. There's so much smoke coming from the Trump campaign and the campaign associates that it's really hard to believe that there is no fire. But we won't know whether there's fire or not until Mueller gets through with his investigation, and that's going to take, months, if not years.
Right.
And the problem is we're going to keep talking about this over and over and over again with no resolution. It's unfortunately, it's like cable news. They got all these hours to fill. They have to fill it with something as they talk about this stuff, and it gets kind of tiresome.
And in a real way, the average person, the pedestrian American, just isn't connected to this. They're not responding. Even if they, in other words, nothing has been exposed that is tantamount to the president shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue. In public, and he hasn't crossed that line yet. He's crossed all kind of lines.
Yeah.
As far as the media is concerned, as far as the investigative world and investigative communities are concerned, but he has not offended his people yet. And until Donald Trump offends his people, Donald Trump is going to be fine, and he can offend all the rest of us as long as he doesn't offend his people.
But I don't think he could offend his people. I mean, seriously. I mean, his people are 23% of the electorate.
Right.
Less than a quarter of the electorate. And no matter what he does, they're going to stick with him for whatever reason. I mean, think about all of the members of Congress and the senators who's after the what was it, the tape, which is the show I'm trying to, Access Hollywood tape came out, who said, I have daughters, I can't support them anymore. And they went into that booth and they pulled Trump. So nothing he can do.
You're absolutely right. And as long as Trump's numbers remain as high as they are with Republicans, and they are 85%, these guys are not going to fold. But the fact is that we're approaching the midterm elections, and that is where the danger lies for them, I think. I mean, if you start seeing some disintegration there of those numbers, if this starts, right now the news organizations, including my own Politico, are all following the breadcrumbs on this Russian story. There's nothing illegal that anyone has found yet. But the fact, and maybe collusion, some people have argued, some of the Fox News commentators have argued that the collusion is not a crime anyway. Right. But the fact is, it may irk a lot of voters out there that Donald Trump's campaign turned to a foreign government and Russia for help. And we'll see how much this investigation is unveiled before the midterms. We only have 18 months.
Yeah. And it's a normal it's predictable in political science that the governing party loses seats in the midterms, except for Bush and Clinton, both because of the country wanting to punish Republicans in '98 for impeaching Clinton rather than censoring him, and also later down the line, as it came to Bill Clinton, and also George Bush's support for him as a result of 9/11 attacks. So those two men gained seats in the midterms, but historically, going back 50 to 70 years, it's predictable. And Carla was citing that in the green room, that about the average of about 24 seats are lost, predictably without personalities, just generically. So then you add these other factors, and it might have some other effect.
That's right.
Speaking of congresspeople and Trump, there have been a number of stories that I've seen about Congress moving to restrict certain the maneuvering power of Trump on like certain foreign policy things, certain sanctions rules and stuff like that. Do you think there's any concerted sense of, hey, we're going to be supporting him publicly because we need his supporters in 2018 and 2020, but can we limit the damage?
I think you're seeing some of these senators speak up when Trump proposed a cybersecurity panel.
Explain that. This came out of his meeting.
This is one of the many headlines that came out of the G20 summit. aside from his, handshake with Putin and, I'm honored to meet you, and this 2-hour conversation, which we never really got a handle on what was said because Trump was the only world leader who did not hold a press conference at the G20. And in fact, the Russians owned the narrative on that whole meeting because Putin had a press conference, and so did their foreign minister. So they were able to say, he bought our line, and we're moving on to other issues. That's pretty much the way that came down. But the fact is that Trump right after that announced a cybersecurity panel, I think it was, an investigative unit with the Russians, which was just the subject of such derision on Capitol Hill. Lindsey Graham tweeted that he thought it was the dumbest idea he had ever heard. Within
he said almost.
Almost. Within 12 hours, that idea today is now been drop kicked to the curb. Trump has said that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I think on foreign policy issues, the president tends to get support from the American electorate and the other political leaders.
Right. They give
but
a lot
on
of
domestic issues, most presidents avoid domestic issues unless it's something like economic policy around taxes. But in terms of favoring a group, the African Americans and civil rights or LGBTQ communities, that's unusual in American politics because it tends to engender opposition.
You're going to get someone mad at you.
And our politics across the board for the past 20, 30 years, really since '64, are clearly defined by the concept of political polarization. Red state, blue state, whether we're talking about the water, the sort of regional areas or the coastal areas in the Bay, in San Francisco, or throughout California, should I say, or compared to the hinterlands of California. There's racial polarization, gender polarization, regional polarization, urban versus rural polarization. America is a country that is sorted out in all of these different ways.
Do you think increasingly so? Because that tends to be the line, that we're increasingly polarized.
It all depends on who you ask. It all depends on who you ask and what you're looking at. If you're asking, certain scholars like Morris P. Fiorina over at Stanford, he would argue that ultimately it's the political elite who are the real divided class, not the people. But if you ask others, like there's a book called The Big Sort by Bill Bishop. Bill Bishop says that the divisions are in everyday people. He said he voted at the University of Texas in Austin in 2004 for Bush's opponent, and he couldn't figure out, was it Gore? Oh, no, Kerry. That's how forgettable he is, Kerry. And he said, Bishop said, I don't know how Bush won because nobody I know voted for him. Yeah. And that indicated the sort of vacuums that we're all functioning in. So this side of the room is liberal, this side of the room is conservative, and you only reinforce liberalism and you only enforce conservatism. So Donald Trump comes down the line and undermines all of these old traditional values.
Totally, yeah.
We've always been polarized around the traditional values of America. We just never been forced to confront it, and Trump is on some way forcing us to deal with some of these realities.
And when you talk about some of the issues, that are facing the Republican Party right now and Trump, put aside the international issues, the tax reform, healthcare, et cetera. We're going to be talking about some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. How interesting is it that Trump just came back from the G20 and he's going back to Paris this week to celebrate Bastille Day? I was asking one of my friends on Capitol Hill, what is that all about? And apparently the idea is like, let's get him out of Washington, and so he's not tweeting 24/7 and just off the front pages. So he's doing something else, because right now this healthcare thing looks like it's going to go down in flames, as well as everything else on the domestic agenda from what we've seen.
He's still going to tweet, even over in Paris. Yeah. They still have internet.
But Bastille Day? What is that?
Well, that was Emmanuel Macron, right? Invited him over.
The irony is that after the G20, a lot of the world leaders had a somewhat, questionable view of Donald Trump, and they hadn't met him. Now they've met him.
They're convinced.
And they're convinced that there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a great, and I hate to put it in these terms of great, but the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, they were at the G20, and one of their political editor, name was Chris Ullman, he did basically a monologue about Donald Trump, which was vicious, if you haven't seen it.
And he's a conservative.
He's a conservative. And basically what he said was that Donald Trump, he wants power because it burnishes his celebrity. And as long as you're talking about him, he's happy. And these world leaders are now trying to figure out ways to get to work around him. And he seemed like a lone, I mean, they have video of him walking around by himself, no one talking to him. You know, I mean, having Ivanka sit in his seat because he was afraid that maybe somebody would take his chair. I mean, it's really sad on the one hand that we're represented by somebody who has such low regard around the world. We've never had that before.
I think Trump thinks that talking tough and talking real hard is a sign of American power and strength. And I think it's unfortunate because so far he is coming across early in this short time of his presidency as one of the weakest presidents in American history, where it really matters, where people who look at presidential politics really measure presidential power. Donald Trump is one of the weakest in history so far. All of this projection around American strength in some ways shows Donald Trump's inability to use what we called in the past soft power and the influence of American ideals to reshape or to influence the world in a positive way. And so in a real way, this is something that he has to, that is happening now in his time.
During the campaign, a critic of his called him a weak man's idea of a strong man.
Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the use of executive orders and compare those to other presidents, he's on pace to outperform both Bush and Obama combined in the use of these instruments because of the inability to get legislation done. An executive order says you're a weak man as president, except in certain emergency areas. Right. But generally speaking, it's saying in terms of influencing Congress's agenda, directly, I'm talking specifically about influencing Congress's agenda, that's a sign of presidential weakness.
It's interesting, James, 5 years ago today, Donald Trump tweeted, "Why is Barack Obama using all these executive orders? It's a sign of a weak president."
Wow. Well, the irony is that his party controls Congress and the Senate, and he still can't get anything done. That to me would be pretty darn scary.
And the real power of the president is, in the political science literature, is the power of persuasion. That's the only power the president is recognized to have in American politics, is the power to persuade 100 senators that we have a common interest and 435 other people that we have a common interest, and my agenda is to lead this discussion. But that's not. But
let's just say quickly one other power. One power he's shown: the ability to control the conversation, and to control where the media is looking at any given moment. Nice. That is no small thing in the sense of you've got some major issues out there that are not being addressed. While we're looking at, who did Jared Kushner meet with, and Ivanka sitting in his seat, and and the tweets every day. Yeah. So that goes to media issues.
I think some of you were here at our last Week to Week when Dan Schnur said that if you look at Donald Trump and what he said and what's in his books and what have been in books written about him, that he's okay with any press story about him because even if it's negative, he figures that at least allows me then to try to change the narrative. Whereas if they're not talking about you, that's the worst thing. And I think that kind of plays into it. I'm glad you brought up, James, the issue of power of persuasion and that being their role, both really domestically and internationally. What did you think of so right before the G20, President Trump went to Poland and he gave a speech there, talked about the West on a suicide trip. We're kind of seem to be past that time when the United States president would go overseas and give inspiring, optimistic, uplifting speeches, and this was more, doom and gloom sort of stuff. I mean, is that we might have expected it?
Huge contrast to when you talk about like Barack Obama going to Berlin and delivering that speech to millions of people who came out to see him there about America and where we are in our place in the world. That speech in Poland was viewed as the highlight of Donald Trump's overseas speech. It was sort of a strong America speech. But once again, it did kind of underscore America's pullback on foreign aid issues, which we're cutting those funds back, the uptick in military spending, for all those reasons. I mean, conservatives loved that speech. Republicans loved that speech. They thought that showed Trump being a strong man on the international stage. But once again, it did speak to what is America's place in the world. And on the issue of climate change, I think that was the singular issue at the G20 where we saw America is alone. We're isolated now from.
Well, I would say Washington is isolated if we get to Jerry Brown,
Good point.
right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because Jerry Brown's trying to do something different.
Well, let's get to that in a little bit. A question from the audience: do you think Donald Trump? Do you think President Trump would dare to fire Robert Mueller? He's the special prosecutor.
Let me take that
Yeah.
first.
Bob?
Yeah.
Yes, I think he would.
Yeah.
I think he would do it because he has faced no consequences for anything he's done. So, no consequences for firing Comey. So and he got to Comey because Comey started getting close to some things that he didn't want him to find. So I think he would do it. Would it be devastating for him? I think it would in the long run, but he hasn't seen. It's like a kid that keeps getting away with stuff. Until they can't get away with it anymore, they're going to keep doing it.
I think you can't answer that at this point. I think it would be politically damaging to a huge degree, but then we all have been wrong on so many
But he
issues.
telegraphed a little bit recently, about 3 weeks ago. He indicated that the relationship between Mueller and Comey was too close, and that these guys are friends, and that this is an illegitimate investigation because of their old friendship. And Trump interpreted their friendship and made them much closer than they probably really are. And so I think that is a hint that if Mueller gets as close as Comey got, if there is a getting close to anything, if there's a there, then we might see.
And in fact,
With
you're
the
right.
appeal.
That was one of the shockers of the G22 when he gave that press conference ahead of time, or just answered a question or two. He was criticizing the media, the intelligence agencies,
And bragging
Barack
about
Obama
Leon
overseas.
About Podesta's emails, wasn't it? That
Yeah,
the
talking
topic?
about how
That
Podesta's
was the big
emails, right,
conversation.
were all anyone was talking about. From my point of view, too, I got to say, the relationship with the press, once again, that's obviously a big concern of mine. The
let's
transparency.
talk about that,
Yeah, I mean, when you have a president going overseas, and I've got friends who are on that trip, who cover that trip, they get no access to anyone in the administration. They get no one answering their questions. This is really unusual. This is just not, it's unheard of, really. And for every foreign leader to have a press conference and answer questions, and to have that meeting with Putin in which there were no outsiders. Now, today, Sarah Huckabee was asked, was there a recording of that meeting? And she said, I don't know. So maybe there was a recording of that meeting, but somebody's got to tell us what happened in that meeting.
Tomorrow
it'll
we'll
be
get a
on
tweet.
task.
Tomorrow
Yeah.
we'll get a tweet says, you better make sure there's no tapes with my room.
Yeah.
Lordy, I
We'll go
hope
for
there are
6
tapes.
weeks
I wanna
looking
know
for
if
the
there's
tapes,
recording.
and then he'll come out and
Yeah.
say, there are no tapes, I was just kidding. And then, again, with Trump, I say, whenever he tweets, look at the ticker on TV. Whatever's going on up here, look down there.
But
Yeah, we've got actually a number of audience questions saying, the whole distraction issue. Do you think that's intentional, or this is just?
I
the
think
way
it's
he does
intentional.
everything?
Absolutely, he's played this so well his entire career as a business guy, as a reality TV show, as a wrestling guy. I mean, all of the rules are out, and I think this is where the media has now become, I think, very sensitive to just like keeping our eyes on the prize, which is. The issue at hand. When it comes to that Russia investigation, all these news organizations, at least in the major ones, are very much focused on trying to uncover what they can on it to get to the bottom of it, whatever that is, right?
2 points.
But I think we're very easily distracted by,
2 points.
all the...
Does anybody here really believe that Putin doesn't have a recording of that meeting?
Interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob.
Think about it.
That's a very good
Think
point.
about it. I mean, the meeting in the White House.
Yeah, they
Very
record.
good point.
Has had the
Very
photo.
good point.
Wow.
So I believe there probably is a recording out there. Regarding the media, don't forget in 2002, the media really fell down on the job when it came to the WMDs and allowed us to go into war. The media now is trying to prove how tough it is, and it's not ABC and NBC and CBS, the evening news. It's cable news that has to fill those hours, and they put so much stuff on every hour. You have a panel of 8 people up there talking back and forth. I mean, to me, as a person that's in the media, I'm like, I watch for a couple hours, and it's like, well, there's really nothing new here. Because every hour it's breaking news, something that happened 12 hours ago. Right. So I really believe the media is its own worst enemy. The media is the reason that gave Trump all this free publicity and allowed him to get where he was. The media are the ones that basically kept Hillary Clinton's emails at the top of the newscast for over a year.
Which highlights, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but which highlights the hypocrisy of Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski last week when they made themselves a big national story about Trump bullying and intimidating them, et cetera, when they clearly supported this man in the campaign, giving him millions of dollars in free airtime, and now they have buyer's remorse.
Fox,
CBS,
MSNBC, CNN, they all did it. I mean, Trump was, even though you have people out there trying to talk bad about him, you're still talking about it.
No, this is deep. Yeah. This is something nobody's really talked about, and you bringing this out, and that is, this is their Frankenstein. Seriously, and literally, this is their Frankenstein that they created as a member of the media himself, and in terms of the free billions of dollars in free ad buy time, I think they call it, that he got on his way to the White House. CBS's head exec bragged about it, right? Yep. And so I think, to me, the media that's all crying about Donald Trump and clowning, what's his name, not Ari Spicer, the other Spicer, Spicy, as they call him, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This is sort of buyer's remorse. They created, way before he ran, the media in the New York media, where I'm from, clearly supported and buttressed Donald Trump's status as a New York icon, along with Giuliani and a few others. Yeah. And so now that they've created this monster, literally, we're all old enough to remember Frankenstein. This is their monster. They don't know what to do with it. Now they're asking you to help them get their monster back in the dungeon. Hell no, he's the president of the United States. He's not going back in the dungeon.
Well, what did you think about it then when the president tweeted that video showing him, supposedly beating up a CNN?
I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't mean to interrupt. I mean, this fake news thing is, we're both in this business, right? This is the biggest frustration to me, because anytime you write something that is a serious piece of that, but it may be slightly critical of Trump, these people are tweeting it fake news. They just there's just a sort of an organizational effort out there.
It's for the conservative media, for the Breitbarts and the Fox News, any facts the mainstream media present is propaganda. And to them, the propaganda, which has been debunked numerous times already, to them it's fact, even if it's been debunked, because the fact checkers, are biased. I mean, you start going down that road of people that will tell you that, well, that's just fake news. If you're I'm on Facebook, and I've got some friends on Facebook, and I'm constantly, posting, corrections for stuff that they put, like this Islamist woman in New Mexico that was arrested near the pipeline with pipeline drawings, and the implication was she was trying to blow it up. Well, when you start doing some research, I called the sheriff's office down there. I'm a reporter. They said that never happened. It never happened. But yet you see it all over the media. So their people are getting this kind of information, and they believe it's true because, starting with the president, he's told them that anything that these guys tell you is false. And I'm the only one you can believe. I'm the only one who can fix it. And that's where we are as a country right now.
And when Trump sits down with Putin at the G20, and as Maggie Haberman of the New York Times reported, Putin says to him, looking out at the media, are these the people that are insulting you?
Disrespecting you or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mind blower.
Did you all see that news story about, is it Brian Karem? The reporter in the White House press.
Oh, Brian Karem.
Karem. I think and he basically just went after Huckabee Sanders, excuse me, saying, you keep accusing us of all this kind of stuff. You have no consequences. We do, because we have everyone who will, turn the channel, stop reading us, write in and demand our bosses fire us or something.
That's right. No, there's no question in my mind, and Bob knows this, both of us are one tweet away from being fired at any time for for printing something false.
Now, and I specifically want to ask you, Carla, because you know people in the White House press corps, and what I heard a number of folks say watching that exchange in the White House press room, they were surprised at how quiet the rest of the press was. I mean, do any of your friends or contacts there, were they like saying afterward they bought this guy a beer, or, gee, they wish he had shut up?
Yeah, no. To me, this was something that needed to be said, because I watch these press briefings all the time just because it's must-watch TV for me now. But I just cannot believe watching a press secretary get up almost every day and lecture these guys like, well, you're fake news and here you go again. You've seen a certain amount of that, but not to the point. At some point, I've been saying to my colleagues, somebody's just got to say to her, look, you're being paid to answer our questions. Our job is to ask the questions, period, end paragraph. That's it, And nobody, finally, somebody said it to her.
Yeah.
And she got nailed again today in the press briefing. The fact that you've been telling us basically lies on this issue of the Russia issue. You keep saying there were no meetings, that we're making this up, and what does this prove today? And the answer is just not there. She's not being held accountable, I don't think.
Real quickly, I wonder if, with your backgrounds, if either of the case of the way in which the media sort of is organized around, I think maybe 10, 20 years ago, they claimed that the entertainment and the newsrooms kind of converged. And so, again, this is another way that Donald Trump has been, the seeds for Donald Trump were in place decades before he becomes a national figure in the way we know him now, because we had largely set that foundation in terms of our media organizing. I think, again, you all are the professionals, where our media became much more about entertainment and less more about the coverage of hard press.
I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of this. So I work for CBS Radio. We're owned by CBS. Since I've been with the company, which is since 1981, we've been owned by CBS, Westinghouse, Infinity Radio, Viacom. Okay, part of Viacom is Paramount Pictures. Viacom was the parent company. I went to corporate HR in 2005. 2006, the company split. So CBS and Viacom became separate companies. Yes, look who owns ABC. Disney, that is an entertainment company. Look who owns NBC, Comcast. It's a cable entertainment company. So yes, we now are owned by entertainment companies, and the problem with the entertainment companies is they don't understand that news is not a profit center. News is not a place that you go to make money. It's a place that you go to hold the powerful accountable. News provides information to have an informed electorate. But now that we're owned by entertainment companies, the bean counters are the ones who make the decisions. So it is really about the bottom line. It never was that way before. Edward R. Murrow will be turning over in his grave right now because of the way things are right now. And I'll give you one example of what this happened. Back in, I think it was in 2002, 2003, with the last round of consolidations, the FCC was having a vote on whether to further consolidate the media. Okay, Michael Powell had a public hearing in San Francisco on this issue. I was the morning reporter that day on a Saturday, and we did not cover that hearing because nobody told us. They say nobody told us not to cover it. But I'm CBS, I want to be able to consolidate further, so why would we cover this hearing to inform the electorate of what's really going on?
I just want to say one other aspect of this is the White House itself has changed the makeup of the press corps in that room. Yeah. Just I think in this last month, Hearst Corporation, one of the biggest, which owns the San Francisco Chronicle, they lost their seat. The San Francisco Chronicle lost its seat in the press room. Who's getting that seat? It's these organizations like Breitbart. Vice News just did a story. Look, I grew up in the era of Helen Thomas. She was my hero in the press room, right? I mean, Vice News just did a story on a 28-year-old former pinup boy for a conservative organization who has the MAGA, bumper sticker all over his wall, and he's been given a seat in the press room. That never would have happened before. Somebody who's never covered news before. You really had to prove yourself before to get a seat in that press room, and that's just not the case anymore.
Well, let's move along to our next topic, which is Jerry Brown, who...
Who's that?
California Governor Jerry Brown has been establishing himself as somewhat of a leader of state-level opposition to the Trump administration on climate matters. He traveled to China to talk with its leaders about climate change, and of course he's challenged Trump during the recent G20 summit. And he's called for a global summit on environmental action to take place here in San Francisco, I believe in September.
Yeah.
And he sent a video message to some activists, thousands of activists actually, who were gathered in Hamburg, Germany, and he said that President Trump, quote, doesn't speak for the rest of America, unquote. Maybe start with you, Bob. I mean, what do you make of Governor Brown's actions? Is it good politics, good policy, or what?
Man, if he was 20 years younger, it would be great policy because he'd be running for president. Because I think he always wanted to.
Yeah.
But I do believe that he does think that there is a great threat to California and by extension the other states by this administration. And some people aren't convinced that climate change is real. I've been to Africa. I've been to places where the sea is now, 100 feet further on than it used to be, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So I've seen the effects of it, but other people don't believe it. And now we have an administration that basically has gutted the EPA and has gutted, climate science, has removed references from the website. So I applaud what he's doing. Not sure if it's going to be as effective as he wants it to be.
But we have seen some sort of glimmers of the fact that maybe Jerry Brown is having an effect. The Clean Air Act, which was passed 5 years ago, gave California this waiver to establish its own tailpipe emission standards. And of course, what does that mean? That California is the 800-pound gorilla in the car market, along with the 12 other states that now have followed California's tailpipe emissions. We're a huge consumer market. And so the auto manufacturers are not going to have all these different standards. If California's got one standard and it's a strict one, they're going to go with that one. And that's what's been happening. So now more than 40% of the population is following, people in those states are following California's emission standards. This week, and Carolyn Lockhead wrote about this, the EPA is kind of folding, saying, originally Scott Pruitt said, we're going to make you guys, go to our standards. This is not going to go with California doing its own thing. Now they're kind of saying, essentially, I guess they are, because there's not enough time for them to just undo all the standards here. Meanwhile, the cars are rolling off the line.
Right.
The auto manufacturers are not going to go for that. So it looks like California maybe has won that battle or will win that battle. And Jerry Brown, I thought by doing this message to an audience in Hamburg on the day that G20 opened, he was basically like, that was a throwdown. Yeah. And he's been doing a throwdown to Donald Trump from the beginning. He keeps saying he thinks Donald Trump is going to come around. And he may be right on that, in the sense of, politically, how long can you hold out on this one when the polls show? People understand it when they see these wildfires in California, these extreme temperatures. They're watching, the ice flows melt and all this other. They get it, and you're seeing more and more stories about how this is the one policy that Trump is affecting that could have lasting impact, because you can undo. The next president could undo whatever he does, but on this one, this is going to affect generations to come, and I think people kind of get that.
Yeah, and this is why Jerry Brown thinks that what Trump has actually done is spawned a pro-environment movement that he did not anticipate. And I thought it's really important to sort of recognize that Jerry Brown, as you say, has been in leadership in these fronts. For 40, 50 years. They called him Governor Moonbeam 40 years ago. Nobody took him serious here in California, and yet the policies he was advocating were visionary compared to where we are today. And so, as you say, California on emissions, auto emissions going back 30, 40 years has been leading. Jerry Brown said that if Donald Trump was elected, he would build a wall around California to protect the people.
That's right, he did.
Remember that? And I think that was something. And it's also important, I think, in terms of understanding the political moment we're living in, that most of us are old enough to remember the states' rights demands of the Confederate, the neo-Confederate, the ex-Confederate South, the states' rights in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, from Strom Thurmond in 48 through Wallace all the way through. I think with both these issues around immigration, and the climate issues, that you're going to see more governors who are liberal arguing for states' rights in the same tradition that Governor Wallace did when he stood in the schoolhouse door stubbornly against the Kennedy demand, or the LBJ demand, or the Kennedy demand, to integrate the University of Alabama. He said segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That's a famous governor. Yeah. Challenging federal power, saying, hell no, you can't do it here in Alabama. And I'm saying Jerry Brown is acting as in that same tradition of no, states' rights, we have our own sovereignty against your national power, and we'll test it if we have to.
One of you mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency taking down data that it has tracking climate change, and so they took it off their website. Soon after that happened, cities began posting it. Chicago was the first one to do it.
That's right.
They were posting this data to their websites. Since then, almost a dozen other cities have followed suit, including San Francisco, Houston, and Red State, Texas. James, is this an effective way of also countering?
I think this is what liberals and progressives have to do, and moderates as well, is local politics is the politics, I think, that will be responsive to the emergence of Donald Trump and his administration. Is if people want to feel a sense of empowerment, they have to do it at the local level where you can change the world more immediately, as opposed to these abstract philosophical ideas such as end racism. Well, what is that? But you can be concrete and go and tutor some young people to improve their lives, to get out of these traps that they tend to be in sometimes. And so that, to me, is much more concrete than the generic claims. And I think that's what the liberal and progressives have to do going forward, is that they have got to figure out ways of using some of the old conservative arguments that the conservatives used to sustain themselves as a minority for 60 years until they got power, in order to offset this turn and this trend. And real quickly, and maybe we'll go to a different question, but I think that the election of Donald Trump is a historical election in the same way in which the 1876 election, the Hayes-Tilden election, reversed American history radically in terms of Reconstruction. And I see Donald Trump's election as the equivalent of the election of Hendrik Verwoerd. If anybody knows him in South Africa, he was the man that set up the policy of apartheid in South Africa after a minority party in 1948 came to power, and in 54 he comes to power and he sets up apartheid. And most of us don't take seriously that Donald Trump represents the reversal of American history. But wherever we were going, history has been reversed, and I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just acknowledging it as a matter of process that has happened, that we are in a historical reversal in terms of issues that liberals and the New Deal state, the liberal state, the welfare state had advocated going back 70 years. Yeah. I'm saying to you finally that this is as much about FDR and the ghost of FDR as it is about the real politics that are brought out in the everyday debates we're having today. The welfare state, the very assumption of the mobilization of the welfare state, the compromise between capital and labor, seems to have been lost in the new arrangement of neoliberal turns toward austerity, et cetera.
And I think, James, when you make a point about how liberals are going to use some of the same arguments, ammunition that conservatives use, that is states' rights, we're seeing this also on this voting rights issue with the Trump Commission looking for all the states to give up information on, military record, social security number, et cetera, and California Secretary of State Alex Padilla saying, "Oh no, you don't. We're not giving that up." And that is the exact argument a lot of conservatives have used. We're not giving information to the government, the big government. We're just not doing it. And now I think 44
states.
44 states have now joined with that. And I think that you're going to be seeing lawsuits.
Yeah. Well, and just today there was news from that commission. It's a commission headed by Vice President Mike Pence and Kansas Secretary of State
Chris Kobach.
Yeah, Chris Kobach.
Who, by the way, won't give up their information either.
Yeah,
that's right. The only state that's complied has been Arkansas.
And it's the most strict of all the states, they say, because of him in terms of these voter requirements.
Yeah. Well, and so this is a commission looking into what it calls election integrity. No, it's not investigating Russia's interference in the election. No, it's not investigating suppression of voting. It's looking into what some on the right believe is widespread voter fraud, which no one's been able to.
Exactly right. I just talked to Secretary of State Padilla on this in the last couple of days, and said, President Trump has tweeted, "What are you hiding?" And he said, "We're not hiding anything." But this is the exact line the conservatives have always said: big government doesn't deserve, access to our private information. And he said, what better way? He called it a hacker's dream come true. They're talking about taking all this private information, military records, criminal records, and so forth, and putting it on a website, an unprotected website. The idea is insane.
Well, and really, they should just email it to Russia. because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
Get it.
When you access the website, I saw this online. When you access the website, it sends you a message that this is vulnerable to be
Really?
hacked.
Yeah.
And it's really scary.
But of course, the idea is, as Padilla said, this isn't really about voter fraud. Right. This is about voter suppression. That the idea is the Republicans are going to insist that we have to have tighter rules, and we're going to restrict people's voting rights. Sure. And that's where
more than they've already done.
Yeah, more than they've already done in some states.
Speaking of Republicans and the president, how many of you here in the audience, raise your hand if you can name one of the Republicans running for governor of the state?
There you go. Oh, okay.
We actually have a couple. No, actually, he said no. He pulled out. Yes,
John
you're actually
Cox,
right.
yes.
Okay, this does not count. Okay,
Travis Allen.
our audience is too smart. You're gonna say no.
Exactly right. Or they read.
Well, the reason I brought it up is, Carla, you've just reported a story on this and about their, in fact, Cox and Allen and
David Hadley, yeah.
David Hadley, their way of dealing with Trump. Why don't you explain what you
This
found?
is the issue for Republicans in California, and this is not just whoever's running for governor. There's now 3 major candidates running for governor, and only one of them, Travis Allen, will even admit voting for Donald Trump. The problem is they've got this thing called the Trump effect, which is if you're a Republican trying to run in this state, do you embrace him or do you put him at arm's length? Do you want him to come and campaign for you or what? Travis Allen, the assemblyman who just got into the race, I talked to him, and he said, yes, I voted for him. He said there's 4.4 million Republicans in the state who did vote for Donald Trump, and if you want these tried and true Republicans to help you make it through the primary, you've got to at least say you voted for a Republican candidate. The problem is, what are Donald Trump's approval ratings here in California? 27%. He got only 31% of the vote here. We've got this top 2 primary system in California, which already, gives the odds of them making it through. This is like mission impossible for Republicans.
Well, if I could throw out some numbers. So 4.4 million, say he gets something like 4.4 million. In the last primary for governor, the 2014 primary, incumbent Jerry Brown got about 2.4 million votes in the primary. The next largest vote getter, Neel Kashkari, got 840,000. So during the primary, it could be a game changer. In the general election, of course, then Governor Brown got just under 4.4 million. But again, that was also an election with low turnout because everyone kind of knew that Jerry Brown was going to.
Right. So we've got a situation where the Republicans are essentially banking on this, that there's people are upset about the gas tax that Brown and the Democrats just put through. That maybe people aren't as supportive of sanctuary cities as a lot of Democrats believe, and some of the polls suggest maybe they're not. They think that the Democrats have overreached in Sacramento, and they're hoping that maybe the economy is going to improve with President Trump, that they'll get through some kind of tax reform plan. That doesn't look likely, but then if the Democrats pick somebody like a Gavin Newsom, he'll be too liberal for most Californians. There's a lot of ifs there, and Travis Allen told me basically, this is basically a shark-infested waters for them. The fact is, money's a big thing too, because Gavin Newsom has already raised $10 million. And John Cox, who's the wealthy businessman, he's going to put in $3 million of his own. He's an interesting figure on his own. He ran for Senate in Illinois against a guy named Barack Obama. You know how that turned out. And here he is in California running for something else. We'll see what happens to the Republicans here in California. It's also on the House races. This is their problem. Does Darrell Issa want Donald Trump to come and campaign for him? I don't think so. And he barely squeaked through last time around with 1,600 votes. So this Trump effect is a big issue for them in California.
Bob, you were shaking your head.
Well, when you mentioned Issa, I remember seeing a Facebook post from Mr. Sulu, who's going to run against him. I don't think he was serious. But I think the Republicans in California, especially those in the House, they're going to face a tough task to get reelected. Because if Donald Trump did nothing else, California Democrats realize that, okay, some of these guys are in so-called safe seats, but they have lots of Democrats in the district. And they know they have to turn out if they want to try to, if the Democrats want to take back the House, which what they keep saying that they want to do, and they say it's really doable, then you have to win some of these winnable races in a blue state like California.
It's going to be interesting too, because this is another interesting aspect about this year. Usually, you can't find anybody to run against an incumbent in the House. Or if they're kind of a minor candidate. It's just very hard. You got to raise a lot of money. This is almost an impossible task to unseat somebody. This year, there's like 7 to 9 Republicans viewed as very vulnerable. In almost all these races, there's at least 4 or 5, maybe 6, 7 people running against Darrell Issa, against Mimi Walters, some of these vulnerable Republicans. There's a crowd of Democrats running against them.
And they're veterans. A lot of them are veterans.
A lot of them are veterans. It's gonna be real interesting. And of course, none of these Republicans, or very few of them, are holding town hall meetings because of this health care bill.
Which I want to get into next.
Yes.
But James, do you have any last words on the Republican prospects?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they're good in California.
Okay.
But I think there'll be a pendular swing to discipline the Democrats for overreaches that are inevitable and the corruption that comes with power. And I think there's a kind of a microcosm inverted of what's happening with the Trump at the national level, with the Republicans at the national level.
Yeah, I've kind of sometimes toyed with the question of who's worse off, Republicans in California or Democrats in Washington right now. Well, let's move on to healthcare. So people around the country have been watching the fate of the GOP healthcare reform bill. It, of course, passed the U.S. House of Representatives to much celebration on the right and for other reasons on the left, because they knew they could run on it.
Right.
But the effort has been bottled up in the Senate. The Senate bill that was written was DOA. I mean, it was written in secret. Even the senators who were supposed to be tasked with writing it officially didn't know what was going on it. Carla, what's the latest on this? What's the prospects?
Well, I mean, this has been interesting, and we're going to see tomorrow, big meetings on the Hill tomorrow. This looks DOA. This bill looks DOA. The fact is that Republicans heard from their people during the 4th of July break. The bill has been changed. There's been more money added for opioid treatment. That's something that a lot of the conservatives in some of those Rust Belt areas wanted. They are going to add the ability to use health savings accounts to pay for premiums. They're trying to tinker with it a little bit. A stabilization fund to keep the markets and so forth. Senator Feinstein was here on Friday doing a big press event in San Francisco, and what she talked about really echoed all the concerns you're seeing at these town hall meetings. The fact is, when they're cutting Medicaid, which in California, as you know, is Medi-Cal, that's a $30 billion a year cut they're talking about for California alone. And some of the numbers she pointed out, 1 in 3 state residents here are on Medi-Cal. 50 to 70% of all the kids in children's hospitals are on Medi-Cal. 1 of every 2 births, 60% of all nursing homes. You got numbers like that going on. People, senators in other states are saying, no, we're not going for this. And they were asking today at the press briefing, well, is the president going to get out there and actually, campaign on this or talk to people? No, I mean, he's going to France to celebrate Bastille Day. I mean, so I don't know what.
You kind of understand why he wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because, he wants to win. He's going to win so much that they're going to get tired of winning. And getting out there and lobbying for a bill that you finally realize doesn't have much chance of passing, that ain't winning. That's losing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a pretty dire sort of prediction when he got out there and tweeted, I guess yesterday, I can't believe they wouldn't do this. Yeah. But the fact is that, believe it, because I've heard from people. I've been to these town hall meetings up and down the state, and I have to say, I've talked to people. Some people on the Republican side say this is AstroTurf. These are manufactured people, groups coming out. No, they are not. I have talked to numerous people at these meetings who say this is the first time I've ever come to a town hall meeting, and I got to tell you, I am scared stiff that I'm going to lose my health care. And these are both sides of the aisle. I think that this, Feinstein has been really relentless on this, saying to people, tweeting and everything else, get out there, call people. Kamala Harris, too, has done the same. And we know how it's going to come down for our senators here in California, but in some of these key states, you're seeing Republicans cave on it, and it looks like at least 10 of them maybe are not going to go for this. That's
I heard it
the
was
numbers
9,
we're looking at.
So someone in the audience asks, is this an opportunity for the Democrats to put forward a bill? Is this an opportunity for them?
I read a good analysis that suggested this is a long shot, like no snowball's chance in hell, et cetera, thing, but maybe this will be the moment where Democrats and Republicans, wouldn't it be great, actually came together and sat down and said, just as during the Reagan years on Medicaid, both sides came together and basically saved it and decided, they both of them took a lot of medicine, but came up with a compromise that saved the funding on it. That whether they could do that this time around, I think it's a different political atmosphere in Washington.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that kind of collegiality anymore.
But I would add that there has been some signs of bipartisanship around healthcare, and specifically around veterans' healthcare, and addressing the 21 million veterans in the United States and their issues. There appears to be both Republicans and Democrats working together. So maybe this is something that these individuals, once they see that you can produce legislation, will get a sense and not be punished for it by your party or your voters, that this might be a way forward. Maybe Americans want more bipartisanship and less polarization, and maybe this is a way to move in that direction.
There's no question people want more cooperation, less polarization. The veterans issue, that's a slam dunk. That's low-hanging fruit. But I think the issue is the Democrats will tell you that, yes, we have offered a number of solutions to fixing the Obamacare, to fix the ACA. And everybody, the Republicans keep saying, well, it's dead, it's dead. No, it's not dead. They're killing it. When you take funding away from the risk pool back in 2015 so that the insurance companies did not get reimbursed, that's why they walked away from a lot of these states, because they couldn't make any money in the states. And so by you saying that it's dying, we forget to ask the question, well, what role did you play in it getting to where it is right now? So the Democrats, on the one hand, say they have offered solutions, but they don't want to be so quick to come in there and help save the Republicans, because they think it's going to be something that will help them in 2018. The Republican side, they were like, well, if we talk to the Democrats, as the president has said we may have to do, then we've campaigned on this for 7 years. We're going to repeal and replace Obamacare with something better. We ain't got nothing better. So now what are we going to do? For us to admit that we can't do this, it's a failure. And I think they're really afraid to admit that they have failed. So what they'll do, if this bill does not pass in the Senate, the first thing you'll see is a tweet from Trump basically saying that the Democrats, killed it. The Democrats wouldn't go along.
Yeah, and you can get a sense of that now, that they're already suggesting, both the president and Mitch McConnell, since the Republicans can't get their stuff together, we'll bring the Democrats on so we can blame them for our failure. They didn't finish the sentence, but that's the rest of it.
There's a certain amount of that.
So, I think it's really... I look at this, and the ACA was not perfect, but why is it that they were so against the ACA? Because the Republicans did help craft it.
It was Republican.
It's a Republican bill.
Yeah,
Romney Care from the Heritage
But you
Foundation.
put it in Obama's name and it's hated. You put it in Trump's name, it's loved.
Right.
So there's something much deeper.
Right. We talked
And this
about
is the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about in America.
I think it's pretty obvious.
We talked about it in the green room.
Right.
But the way in which these cultural polarization issues are informing everything else, the tax issues, immigration issues, all of this is about the transition that this country is in terms of the demographic transformation of this country. And we don't have the spiritual or wisdom leadership, if there's such a concept, the wisdom leadership available to help us all navigate this transformation of our country and our society.
On that note, we've got a few more minutes before the news quiz, so let me try to get through some of these questions. There's some great questions. I don't know if I'll be able to get through all of them, but one person asks, do Republicans need to fall out of love with Ayn Rand to survive? Anyone want to take that?
Good one.
No comment.
That's a great one. Well, it's working for Paul Ryan right now. And that's his
Really good question.
his influence intellectually, and he believes in
Yeah, he's listed
Atlas
as
Shrugged
one of his
and
favorite.
all her other works. And he recently said, as a part of the Medicaid debate, that he's been wanting to get rid of this since he was in college drinking beers. Doing six packs or whatever you call it, So this is a frat boy, theoretical, philosophical, immature sophomorish kind of nonsense that this man is grown up to be 40 plus years old and wants to see theoretically if his Ayn Rand. I was a student of Malcolm X when I was 22, 23, 24 years old. I'm a grown man now. I am not a student of nobody now. And the idea that you still have people beholden to these ideas like this, to me, is a real problem.
The word you were looking for is keggers.
Yes, kegs. That's right.
Doing
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Thank you.
Who do you see as the new rising leadership in the Democratic Party? We were kind of talking about this in the green room.
We were talking about this before. I was telling these guys that I was over the weekend. I was at a gathering where a lot of Democrats were discussing this. Like, we need a game changer. We need somebody who's totally outside the box. They came up with two names. The two names they believed could absolutely beat Donald Trump: Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama. It was like. Oprah, why not? The fact is that, when you're looking at, and maybe it's true that the Democrats are going to need something,
No.
That Trump has totally changed the playbook.
They're not going to do it. They're black.
No, but I asked in the green room if we think, and I wonder what you think, if the American media and average citizens, voters, will we in the future can other people come out now and act like Trump? Can we have an Al Sharpton? Can Al Sharpton now act like Trump as a presidential candidate? Or will the American people say, no, that's Trump's personality, we'll forgive him for his sins, but nobody else can come along? Can the next cycle of candidates behave like this? Have our politics adjusted and calibrated permanently to lower the standard of our candidates, if that's what you think has happened? Or is it going to reset back to where we say, no, you still have to live a certain way and be a certain way? Because if you remember the Republican, who was the minority candidate? I think it was Johnson. Remember Johnson was running for president this time around? The independent, I believe he was, Johnson. And he made the mistake and said, Aleppo, what's Aleppo?
Right.
Oh, yeah, right.
And they destroyed him.
Yeah.
How many Aleppo moments have Donald Trump had? 10,000 to the 10th power, and none of them has stuck. So I'm wondering in our politics if in the future we'll reset to our old requirements that what Nixon did was impeachable. I'm not being political here. What Trump has done or is accused of doing has far exceeded Nixon, and yet he's still viable as president. So have our standards changed, or will we see Oprah and Michelle Obama be taken at face value in the future?
Or as like the political wisdom a lot of times is that the candidates and voters go back and forth between their preferences. So Trump is this bombastic president. The next president will be very serious. Yeah. So people have talked about like somebody like an Adam Schiff, Harvard educated, kind of a boring, but he's super straightforward. Has been out there on cable TV talking about, and just a completely different kind of profile for the president. That may be what happened.
LBJ landslide in '64, Nixon in '66. You end up with George Bush. You end up with Bill Clinton impeachment, this immoral guy. You end up with a Christian preacher, George Bush, right? You end up with Nixon and Ford and the scandals around Watergate. What does the American electorate give us? Jimmy Carter, a Christian pastor. So there's a certain wisdom or symmetry or something at play here. I don't know what to call it, but something is at play where we reset and recalibrate. Yeah. But I think that reflects our ongoing polarization.
Or it could be that somebody from tech, or another millionaire businessman, Mark Cuban. I don't know. So,
I don't know if we could have another billionaire who's
Ross Perot. Bring Ross Perot back.
Another billionaire. Yeah.
I don't know. Sure, some Americans think it's great that he's a billionaire because he's a successful billionaire, successful businessman, he can run the country, but I think we have now seen that being a successful businessman in the world of business is not the same as being a successful politician and running a country. Ask Rex Tillerson, who doesn't understand why he can't just not talk to the media and just do what he wants to do. When he was the head of Exxon, what he said goes. And now they're in positions where they have to actually be accountable. Earlier I mentioned with Michelle Obama and Oprah, they're black. I do believe that in this country right now, if it wasn't for the fact that Obama was black, we wouldn't be having all these conversations.
That's right.
So
That's right.
to put somebody else up like a Kamala Harris in 2020, I think it's a non-starter unless the
But you got to
Democrats
say
can
about
come together.
Oprah. I got to say about Oprah. I mean,
People
think
love
of,
Oprah.
Think about influencer, communicator, somebody who's built from a
Businesswoman.
childhood
Yeah.
to become one of the world's.
Yeah.
An interesting
she's
thought.
Well,
if she was ever interested in it, but
I'll just-
why would she leave Hawaii and all the great life?
I was in Australia, I think this was in 2011, and Oprah was coming to Sydney. Remember that when she went to Australia? And I was talking to this cab driver who said, yeah, man, they're going to close down the whole waterfront. You know, the last time they did that was when George Bush was here. And she's more popular than George Bush. It was going to be even worse.
Listen, we'll be back with more stuff to talk about and, of course, more news quiz questions on Monday, July 24th, right here. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thanks for our great panel, Carla Marinucci, Bob Butler, and Dr. James Taylor. Have a wonderful week, everybody.